What happened back there?
I don't care.
Hey, I've got an idea. Let's rock talk.
Hey everybody, it's Lord Magicus, and today we're gonna do a new series that I'm gonna call MTG Rock Talk. So what is this gonna be about? Every so often we get an announcement from Wizards of the Coast that really deserves some special attention and discussion. And we've done this once before on this channel, and because I suspect we're gonna do it again, I'm gonna give this series its own title. So it'll be easier to kind of pull these aside from normal gameplay videos. And everybody seemed to like this last time we did it, so I think it's worth doing it again here. There's some really interesting insight that we can get from this that goes a little bit beyond the normal banned and restricted announcements. So while we are not going to necessarily do this with everyone, I think this one in particular is something that everybody across all the formats really want to. They're very interested in the reasoning that Wizards came to the decisions that they came to and what it's going to mean for Magic as a whole going forward. So let's read about this, and then we'll discuss each format as we're going through it. So let's start here. So Brawl, they banned Drannith Magistrate and Winnower Joiner of Forces. Legacy, Lurrus and Zerta are both banned, and in Vintage, Lurrus is banned. So Vintage first here. So let's see. In the weeks following the release of Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths on Magic Online, we've observed a rise in popularity and win rates of Vintage decks using Lurrus as a companion. Because of the nature of Vintage's wide card pool and powerful restricted cards, the deck building cost imposed by Lurrus is less restrictive relative to the payoff of having Lurrus as a companion. So what the hell does that mean? Basically, because Vintage has literally every card in it, aside from like, you know, a handful of dexterity and anti cards that are banned from it, essentially everything is legal, even as a one of, and that means like all of the decks can just be jammed full of ridiculously cheap cards like the Power 9, and you know, you're just going to play like Black Lotuses and Moxes and stuff in your deck, and a bunch of really cheap threats because the format is very low to the ground. So playing Lurrus in the sideboard is actually, it's not really a restriction because most of the decks in Vintage are already running ridiculously low curves that kind of fit into his restriction. So the further back in Magic you go, the less restrictive having a low mana curve is. And yeah, with Vintage having everything, it's basically not a restriction. There's very few cards like, oh no, you can't play Jace the Mind Sculptor in your Vintage deck. Wow, what a shocking, you know, restriction that's going to be for this. It's not like there aren't a million other ways to go about winning the game. If you have Lurrus and, you know, Black Lotus, that is already more powerful than basically anything else that you're going to do. So it's what you can change your win con to or whatever to fit Lurrus's restriction, but because like all the engine cards, you know, like the Moxes and whatnot, are easily playable in these decks, Lurrus isn't really restrictive in Vintage whatsoever. So as a result, win rates of several archetypes using Lurrus have surpassed 55% in Magic Online League play, and collectively decks using Lurrus are representing too large of a portion of the metagame, with no indication of a shift away from this trend. It's very interesting that they posted the win rate of the deck, but they didn't want to post the metagame percentage that they consider to be too large. This is really, I think, something that pisses off a lot of people, because they curate their 5-0 dumps very specifically to try to hide, you know, that statistic, and they made damn sure not to tell anybody, you know, what constitutes too large of a metagame percentage. And I think that's a question that, you know, a lot of people really want to know for each of these formats. Like, is there a percentage, you know, if people feel like we're looking at, you know, top 32s and whatnot, or of different challenges, or maybe looking at, you know, day 2s for GPs and stuff, at what percentage, you know, is it a warning sign for a deck that it's going to get banned? Like, if there's a deck that's at 15%, is that a problem? 20%? Maybe 10%? Who knows? So they gave us the win percent, which I don't think most people really care very much about. I think the thing that more people care about is how often do they have to play against it. And that's the one statistic that they didn't bother to put here. So, very interesting choice. I mean, I personally would have liked to see that number. If they're going to say too large of a portion, I think that people have a right to know, well, what constitutes too large of a portion? Like, what do you obviously have some sort of, idea or a guideline in mind. Why not take this opportunity to share that with people? This is a very ongoing question with especially like with Modern right now. There are a lot of decks that people point to, like say Neoform, and say these violate the old rules of Modern that you laid out, that you said we were going to use to ban decks by. It's like Neoform is a turn 1 deck. It definitely is a problem in regards to Modern being theoretically a turn 4 format, but there are other concerns as well. Like they're not necessarily, decks don't get banned for just violating one format principle. Sometimes it's other ones. Like with Dredge, it was Battle of the Sideboard, so that was a different format principle. But so clearly they have a format principle here for Vintage that says if it's too large of a metagame percentage, we're going to ban it. But they didn't bother to tell us, well, this is about where that line is. I don't know. That just seems like a really interesting thing to not. I guess they don't want to be held to the fire against. If they choose to like hold one deck to account for that, then at some point in the future, if it looks like another deck is like that, maybe they just don't want to have to be accountable to it. And I don't like that idea that they're shying away from accountability of something like that. So for this reason, they're banning Lurrus of the Dream Den in Vintage. We recognize that it's a rare occurrence to ban a card for balance reasons in Vintage rather than restricting it. This is a unique case where restricting Lurrus wouldn't affect its usage as a companion, which is the primary motivation for making this change. Okay, so here's the thing. Vintage does not get power level bans. That's why the Power 9 are legal, including Black Lotus, and the only cards that have been banned in Vintage so far are the Anti cards, Dexterity cards, and Shrahazard. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but everybody knows that card is banned because it just creates these like infinite like little sub games that nobody wants to deal with. So yeah, that's banned. So this is really a very unique thing to Vintage because this is the first time a card is actually not restricted and just outright banned because of how powerful it is. This specifically Lurrus has an ability, along with all the other companions, but Lurrus in particular is a problem. Its ability means that restricting it doesn't actually do anything, because even if you only play one in your 75, it's going to be in your sideboard anyway, so it effectively means that it doesn't matter, like, if you restrict it, you're going to start every game with it regardless. Most of the decks are only playing one for this exact reason, because you can't play more than one Lurrus in the deck, so. But beyond that, like, the problem is not even necessarily that you only are playing one. It's that the companion mechanic means that the one copy that you're playing in your sideboard means you may as well be playing it as a fucking 15 of, because you always have it in your starting hand. So no amount of restricting is going to make a difference here. So here, they have a few options with what to do. One is they could do something like, say, we're going to change the companion mechanic. Another is that they could say, you know what, maybe we should just not have companion mechanics apply to Vintage. But no, instead they decided that they're going to do a power level ban for Lurrus. So what does this mean? Like, apparently the Vintage is, a format where you can play Black Lotus, but Lurrus is too powerful. So does it, like, in some sense, you could actually make the legitimate argument that Lurrus is more powerful than fucking Black Lotus is in Vintage. It's insane. This is the first time, and this is not a good precedent, I don't think. Like, I think you also very easily, like I said, could have just said, you know what, you can play Lurrus in Vintage, and we're going to restrict it to a one of, but you also cannot play it as a companion. Like, just companion aren't a thing. That's a thing they could have done, where that way they don't have to outright ban a card because of how powerful it is. They could. I think the answer is they probably should have did something with the mechanic itself. But this is not good. Like, this is now a precedent where in the future they have the the precedent set that they can power level ban cards in Vintage if they want. I think that kind of defeats the purpose of what Vintage is. I mean, I understand it's not easy to decide what to do with companions because they pretty much get around the primary method of dealing with cards in Vintage is just restricting them to make it less likely that they're going to start in your hand, so that way you balance power with consistency. All right, that's one of the main ways that you balance things in Magic. So even when you're looking to ban cards, you know, in Modern, so okay, you might have a deck where it's like, okay, I can win in turn 2 or even turn 1, but if it's only like, you know, 1% of the time, that's probably not a big deal because, you know, maybe the power is very high that you can win the game in turn 1, but if it happens very inconsistently, then it's not really a problem. But yeah, the companions being 100% consistent regardless of whether they're restricted to one copy or not is a huge deal. And I think that, yeah, not only as being the 8th card in your starting hand, but just the fact that it, no matter what, it will always be in your starting hand means restricting it is not going to do shit. So I don't know. The problem I also see with this is now what happens if another companion, say like Zerda or something. What happens if that one becomes a problem in Vintage? Or what happens if Gyruda becomes a problem in Vintage? Are you gonna now have to ban that in Vintage too? Like, and what happens if they're gonna print more companions later on? Are they gonna have to just accept that companions are just going to have to be banned in Vintage as opposed to dealing with it some other way? Like, it raises a lot of questions that I don't think anybody's gonna have the answer to for a while. So I don't know. This is really unprecedented, and I'm surprised that I don't think this is how I would have handled it. I mean, I understand that Wizards doesn't really want to change companion just yet, but we'll get to that in a little bit. This needed to happen. Lurrus had to go away because you can't keep, like, you know, having people start with Lurrus and then just like, okay, turn 1 Lotus, play Lurrus, and then, you know, bring Lotus back. Now you have a Black Lotus every turn for the rest of the game. Like, that's not acceptable in any regard whatsoever. So, like, yes, this definitely had to go away. I just don't know that this was the right precedent that you want to set to deal with it, because this is almost certainly not going to be the last time that we're going to have a problem like this. So, especially if this mechanic stays around, like, that's going to be a ridiculous problem. So let's look at Legacy. This is going to be really interesting and worth talking about. So as with Vintage, the wide card pool of powerful low mana cost permanents in Legacy makes the power level of using Lurrus, the Dream 10 as a companion, not commensurate to the deck building cost. Yeah, so same thing, like, you don't have like Moxes or Black Lotus, but you still have stuff like, you know, Lotus Petal and Lion's Eye Diamond, where they're basically like on par, like, with what the functionality of, like, you know, what Lurrus was doing in Vintage. Like, if you go, like, you know, you're playing say a Storm deck, you're basically already just playing Lurrus as a free roll now, because now your Storm line goes, you know, crack LED for like this mana, play Lurrus, replay the LED from your graveyard, crack it again. So you've now just effectively added Lurrus in your sideboard to get a free 2 Storm count to any Storm chain that you're doing. Or even just playing Lurrus to be able to grind out games where you're not going to be able to combo off, but it's, yeah, and it lets the Storm decks, you know, then use stuff like Goblin Crater Maker to beat the hate. They can throw away their mana rocks early to try to, you know, ramp out something like Lurrus or Crater Maker, and then, you know, get them back later. So it's not a big deal if you want to use petals for something like Lurrus, or yeah, to play like Lurrus or Crater Maker, and then you just replay them after you have your Lurrus in play. So there, yeah, it was not really a good thing, and it caused problems similar to that. Same thing with like Delver. Like, they're already playing, like, you know, 1 or 2 drops, like stuff like Dreadhorde Arcanist, Tarmogoyf, Delver of Secrets, sometimes like Nimble Mongoose. Those kind of cards already ridiculously common. The only real cost in Delver sometimes is, like, now they wouldn't be able to play True Name Nemesis or Gurmag Angler. And then, you can't play like Liliana with it, but not really that big a deal because the ability to just draw a card every turn with stuff like, Urza's or Mishra's Bauble, very strong, and you still have that same synergy like in Modern with Seal of Fire and things of that sort. Very low mana curves, very powerful, so yeah, same deal as Vintage for the most part. So several archetypes that were already strong, including Delver variants, which I just mentioned, have incorporated the use of Lurrus as a companion well, necessitating relatively few deck building changes. Yes, we just discussed that. Collectively, Lurrus decks represent an increasingly large portion of the metagame. Again, not mentioning how large of a portion of the metagame they find to be unacceptable. So, with several variants maintaining win rates above 55% in Magic Online League play. So this 55% number seems to be really important to Wizards of the Coast. They don't really like it when decks have a 55% win rate against the rest of the metagame. Because that means when the metagame is revolving around one deck and they're trying to adjust to hate out that deck and that deck is still winning in the face of hate at a greater than 50% rate, then that is a serious problem. So that seems to be kind of the rationale that they're using. If the most popular deck is maintaining a win rate that's that high, and the rest of the metagame can't seem to, fight it very effectively, and it's continuing to win more than 50% of the time, that seems to be one of the triggering things that causes Wizards to take action, and they've been pretty consistent about that. I believe in several other ban announcements they've made similar arguments. I think you get even with something like Hogak, they said something similar to this effect. Matchup data indicates that metagame forces alone aren't sufficient to keep these decks in check, so we're choosing to ban Lurrus of the Dream Den Legacy. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one being Chalice of the Void, while it seems like if you put it on 0 it's fine, but it's not really enough to stop them from getting the sort of the value out of it that they can. So let's pretend okay, I'm up against a Lurrus Delver deck. If I put Chalice on 0, it turns off their Bauble, so they don't get to draw a card every turn, but they can still just loop Seal of Fire or something else. So like a creature, for instance, they can just keep replaying those out of the graveyard. So it's not really that big a deal. If you put Chalice in 1, again, they can just keep drawing cards. And I mean, even something like Chalice is not really that effective because they're already playing a bunch of stuff like Abrupt Decay, Assassin's Trophy, Goblin Crater Maker, a Braid, sometimes Wear and Tear in certain decks. So Chalice is not very effective at keeping it on lockdown. Grafdigger's Cage is similar. It has similar issues to it. The cage is very vulnerable, and yeah, it's just, I don't think it does a good enough job to keep it in check, so it makes sense. So Lurrus, yeah, banned in Legacy. Now here's the other part. This was kind of unexpected to me. In addition, we're seeing very high win rates among decks using the Zerda, the Dawn Waker as a companion in combination with Grim Monolith. While not yet widely played, the Magic Online metagame data indicates that these decks would become problematic in both win rate and metagame share. So therefore, we're also taking the additional step of banning Zerda in Legacy. So I've played against this deck on this channel before, and you've seen how ridiculously fast this combo can be, and it is very resilient. It plays stuff like Wear and Tear and a Braid in it to turn off Chalice and Null Rod, which are some of its primary issues. What was I gonna say? Yeah, so Zerda Bomberman was definitely a very powerful deck, and it's also surprising that they're naming another companion. So they have to ban 2 companions in Legacy. So it's not like these are the only 2 companions that have been very powerful in Legacy, but I'm kind of interested that they picked Zerda over something like Yorion, because I think Yorion is now poised. They played Kingmaker for that, and that deck is now going to just take over instead. So Apparently, though, Zerda's win rate must have been pretty damn high if it's not being played like nearly as much as like the Delver deck, but they're looking at its win rate and it's still ridiculously high. Yeah, I guess that it metagame factor is, or the percentage is one thing that they look at, but the win rate is also another one. So they didn't tell us, what the metagame percentage was, but obviously it was low. So I'm assuming that means its win rate had to be probably a little bit higher than the other 55% that they were telling us about for the Delver deck. So that's both surprising and not. Like, I knew this deck was powerful, but I had no idea it was that powerful. But it kind of makes sense when you think about it, because like I said, they play a lot of the answers to those decks that they need. Part of the problem is also Karn, I think, can... Yeah, it deals with stuff like Chalice very easily. If you try to play like Chalice on 0 to, turn off LEDs or Lotus Petals, or, Karn just finding, things out of the sideboard to help. Certainly, yeah, I can see, how that would help play around some of this, so I don't know. The deck was very consistent for sure. Like they played a lot of copies, or a lot of ways to find like the monolith, and a lot of things to really ramp up the mana quickly with it, and a lot of cards that really answer it quickly too. So I think they even had stuff like, Karn could like turn Null Rod into a creature, and then you could like Swords to Plowshares it or something like that. So even stuff like Null Rod, they still had plenty of ways to deal with it too, which is surprising. But I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons that it makes sense to get rid of Zerda. It's definitely, if it wasn't a problem now, and it seems like it actually was, it definitely would become a problem. So I'm not sad to see that go. I think that was a good card to ban. I think, though, the problem is more what they did not address in this. We didn't see any mention of Arkham's Astrolabe. We didn't see any mention of Veil of Summer. We didn't see any mention about Oko. And I think those are like 3 cards that the majority of like Legacy players, as far as I can tell, really seem to have a problem with. Probably Oko is the most acceptable of those 3. That some, like, people seem kind of split on that, whether Oko is okay or not in Legacy. And I think maybe a good way to go about doing it is take away Astrolabe and Veil of Summer first, and then see if Oko is fine. Because part of the issue is that, Oko is a pain in the ass to deal with because he has those other 2 cards supporting it. So if you wanted to do something like, say, Abrupt Decay Oko, well, you can't, because they're going to play Veil of Summer and use that to effectively counter Abrupt Decay and draw a card for 1 mana. Or, you just like curve out Astrolabe into Oko, and now all of a sudden Oko immediately makes a 3/3 elk that can start attacking or blocking. And it's just very hard to deal with. So if you take away those 2 cards, like, it's very possible that Oko is not as big a problem as it is right now. But none of those cards at all are mentioned here, and I think Astrolabe and Veil of Summer in particular are 2 of the more egregious ones. Though to some smaller extent, stuff like Teferi, which also does not really have a lot of fans at the moment, and Oko for sure, like, has a lot of people railing against him. They all undermine like some of the most important cards in Legacy that keep this format in check. Arkham's Astrolabe undermines Wasteland, so a lot of the deck can just freely jam 3 and 4 colors without having to give a single fuck about their mana base. What are you gonna do? You can't Wasteland their basic lands like that, so Astrolabe just, lets them freely play as many colors as they want to. Veil of Summer undermines Force at Will. I mean, we've even seen, like, the Epic Storm, like, adopting main deck Veil of Summers over Thoughtseize and Duress. So they like, even combo decks drop discard spells because they're just so bad. Not only does Veil of Summer undermine, the Force of Will, it also undermines Thoughtseize. So, like, any of, like, the non-blue decks that are relying on discard in order to get there, they're not going to be able to keep that shit in check either. And instead, like, decks, like Storm now, they just adopt Veil of Summer because you just cast a 1 Veil. Once that resolves, like, your spells are just uncounterable for the rest of the turn. So you don't even have to worry about playing around Force in the Storm Chain. It's insane. So yeah, we have that undermined, and then also you look at like Teferi and Oko, which both undermine Chalice of the Void, and Chalice of the Void was another method that kept a lot of these decks in check. And I mean, to some extent, Veil of Summer can also undermine Chalice a bit. If you put Chalice on 0 against Storm, for instance, and they play Veil of Summer, right? The Veil will make all your spells uncounterable. If this works the way I believe it does, so yeah, then you just play all of your stuff through the Chalice. And I want to read this just to make sure that I understand this correctly. I don't have this pulled up on the screen here, but I'm just gonna read this on my phone. Yeah, spells you control can't be countered this turn. So it doesn't even say like can't be countered by like blue spells or anything. Like if you're facing like Chalice on 0, well, now like before that was like very crippling to Storm, because it's hard to like combo without being able to play stuff like Lotus Petal and Lion's Eye Diamond. But well, yeah, now if you put Chalice on 0, they can just play a single Veil of Summer at the start of their turn, and now they can jam all of their 0 mana artifacts into it. So you're kind of forced to play Chalice on 1 before you can rely on Chalice on 0. So, and the 0 is a lot of times like the better number to put it, because it denies their mana a lot better. Stuff like Lion's Eye Diamond is just way too powerful. Like, you really want that not to resolve. But now you're kind of necessitated into, like, most of the 1-drops in like those decks are just cantrips, and while turning off cantrips is it's good at prolonging a game, it's not going to actually stop them from comboing for the most part. So okay, your Chalice in 1 stops Veil of Summer, but now they can just jam like their combo anyway. So yeah, Veil can undermine Chalice a little bit, but also, like I was saying, Teferi and Oko both undermine Chalice in their own ways. Like, Teferi just bounces it, and then you just like unload your entire hand of 1-drops, which Chalice has done nothing. And then even when you replay it, they're not going to have any 1-drops left, so what was the point? And Oko just turns it into an Elk and then just laughs at it. So like, all of the really important format police cards are just going to be undermined by all of these cards that I just talked about. And you know what's going to happen? 4-color Yorion Snoko. That's what's going to happen. Yorion is already very strong, because it's similar to Luris. It's a companion that it's not like an 8th card in your hand. It's actually like a 9th card in your hand, because when you play it, it's going to almost definitely draw you at least 1 or even 2 more cards minimum, because you're just going to blink stuff like Arkham's Astrolabe, maybe something like Omen of the Sea, or things of that sort. So when they come back, they're just going to trigger and draw you more cards. And in particular, it's even more disgusting because when you play it alongside Teferi, well, Teferi can bounce the Yorion back to your hand. So once you run the opponent out of resources with your blue soup, you just replay the Yorion and then blink everything again, and then you get to draw even more cards. So it means like you can like 2-for-1 yourself, like by using stuff like Force of Will to stop your opponent. So they have no, like, and then yeah, you use a bunch of forces, and then you just play Yorion, you get all that card advantage back, and you continue to keep getting it back over and over again. And it's this combination of stuff like Oko and Teferi and Astrolabe and Veil of Summer, and now alongside Yorion. I think that's going to be a huge problem for Legacy, and I don't understand why they didn't address any of that here. It seems like they were conscious of the fact that there are other companions besides Luris that are a problem right now, which is why they banned Zerda. But Yorion is like I think that it's very closely tied. Like, it's a very strong contender for second best companion, if not like one of it's. I don't think it's as good as Luris, but it's not very far off, I think. So to completely ignore it in this announcement, I don't think was a good idea. And not only that, but like all of the other cards I just mentioned, they were problems before we had companions, and they're going to now be even worse afterwards. So I don't know how many of those they're going to have to end up banning, but it feels like that's where the format is probably headed to, like a Miracles kind of 4-color Yorion build that is going to continue to like dominate now because of it. So companions are like not going away in Legacy, like that's a problem for sure. And there's also like other stuff too, like the Gyruda Reanimator deck. That thing is also ridiculously disgusting and has its own problems with it. Namely that, like, you can mulligan to 2 with that deck and still win the game on turn 1 before your opponent has even done anything. Because all you need are just 2 Lion's Eye Diamonds and you win the game. You cast 2 LEDs, crack them, cast Gyruda, and if you mill, like, say, Gristlebrand and you reanimate a Gristlebrand off of it, well, now you can just draw, like, 14 cards, like, okay, play a land, play a Lotus Petal, you know, and then just go off from there, and effectively, like, now you have, like, a bajillion power of creatures in play, and probably enough, like, cards in hand to disrupt them, to keep them from doing anything against your board state. And you started with the 2-card hand, so, like, I don't know. I don't think that Gyruda is something that should be ignored either, but I guess we're going to see if that becomes another issue. Every single one of the companions has that potential to it. It's like, some of them are more broken than other ones, but yeah, I don't think spot banning them is it's not the way forward for Magic, but I think that's something they address towards the bottom, so just keep that in mind. Like right now, we have spot banned 2 of them in Legacy, which is a good start, but it is far from fixing the problems that are inherent to this. So alright, we'll talk about Brawl really quick, and then we'll go to what this says at the bottom here, because I think that we've talked about like Legacy specific enough. There are some more broader implications that we need to discuss about this. So Brawl, part of our who even plays Brawl? Like, I guess this is like Commander for Arena basically. But it's Commander for Arena that they make you keep like spending wild cards on to play every time that things rotate, right? That's I don't understand why that's appealing to anybody, and like certainly it's not really appealing to most of the people that I know and talk to, but apparently somebody must like it, because they Wizards of the Coast obviously likes it, because it's the closest Commander analog that they're going to get for Arena right now without having access to basically every card that's ever been printed. So, and that's really what it comes down to. Like they want some form of Commander on Arena, but it also has to be tied to Standard so that it can burn your wild card. So that's what its purpose is. But all right, well, let's read what they have to say. Part of our philosophy for Brawl is that it shouldn't be easy for a single card to completely shut down a wide class of commanders. An example of us acting on this philosophy in the past was banning Sorcerer Spyglass. We feel Draneth Magistrate falls into this category and generally takes away from the fun and self-expression that comes from the building around a commander in Brawl, so we are banning it. So let's just look at this. Magistrate, if you didn't know, is a 1/3. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hand. So effectively, it is a card that says, if this is in play, your opponent can't cast a commander. Which, yeah, I understand why they do that. And Spyglass is sort of the same way, where if you're playing like a commander that has an activated ability on it, you just Spyglass the commander, and then it more or less turns it off. They have like a grizzly bear now. But no, Magistrate just straight up says, no, you just can't cast it at all. And so I understand. It would, maybe if this said something like, you know, no one can cast spells from other than their hands, maybe it would have been more fair. But, so this kind of like defeats the purpose of Commander, which is to cast the Commander spell. So, I mean, I guess that's fine. If I had any criticism of this card, it's that it's a one-sided effect, and I think that part of the problem with Magic design in the last like year and a half now has been one-sided effects, like stuff like, you know, Teferi, like Narset, Karn, Plague Engineer, and like this card for like what one-sided effects are really hard to, I think, balance in a lot of these formats, where they lead to more swingy, like snowball kind of gameplay. And I understand that's like what they've been trying to push, but it also doesn't really make for enjoyable gameplay in my experience. But it makes it so that games don't go as long. I think like it's harder to come back from one-sided effects against even stuff like Dead of Winter, for instance, is another really good example of that. Well, where if you build like a Sultai Snow deck, well, now you have a sweeper that kills all your opponent's creatures and basically just lets you win the game in combat because they're so far behind. So whereas like something like Damnation, you actually have to kind of build around it and play around it. You can't commit too many creatures to the board, but if Damnation was a one-sided Wrath of God, then it wouldn't. Then people would just jam it and not care. So yeah, I guess one-sided cards like this, they have their own issues with it, but at least it's fine to like say, you know what, if you're gonna play a format that's revolving around casting something from not your hand, then at least let them cast it. So sure, fine. The more interesting thing though is this. On the balance side of things, we're seeing that high win rates of decks using Winota, Joiner, or Forces as a commander are leading to increased play rates and reduced diversity of play experiences for Brawl players. So people are seeing that Winota is very powerful, and more people are choosing to play this. So while we're generally tolerant of more tolerant of win rate outliers in Brawl and formats with competitive spirit behind them, choosing to make a change here in order to open up more viable choices for the self-expression in the Brawl metagame. So they're trying to like walk this line of like, yeah, we want formats like Commander and Brawl to not really be held to the same kind of competitive standards that we hold other things to. So if a deck has that like 55% win rate, like they don't care as much about it. But because now it just turns out like, this card is so powerful that people are just naturally gravitating towards it, and like the format is it's becoming too high of a meta percentage. So they don't tell us exactly how common that is again, but obviously it was too high for them to consider it acceptable. So what exactly does this thing even do? Well, we should actually mention this because this actually relates to a problem in Standard that we're having at the moment. So whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a human card from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Put the rest of the cards in the bottom of your library in a random order. And what's worth noting, if more than one non-human creature you control attacks, the ability triggers separately for each of them. So if you attack with like 3 non-human creatures, you won't look at the top 18 cards once. You'll look at 6, and then you'll look at 6, and then you'll look at another 6. Why is this a problem? Well, so you play this in like a weenie kind of deck where you just like put a bunch of like aggressive red and white creatures in it, attack with a bunch of them, and then put stuff like our Agent of Treachery into play. Like in Standard, like that's the problem card is using Winota to get out like Agent of Treachery in turn 4 and just stealing your opponent's stuff. You can, and sometimes you might even hit multiple Agents of Treacheries on turn 4 and just stealing like 2 of your opponent's things at once. Like there are a lot of really scary humans that you can end up putting into play attacking like that. It just makes it very, very hard. This thing doesn't even need to attack. It's whenever a non-human attacks. So, like I said, you just play this in turn 4 and then attack with the rest of your creatures. So, normally you would think an effect like this creature should have to be the one that attacks in order to... No, it's whenever a non-human. So, she's just kind of standing there and everything else around her is the ones that are actually triggering this effect. So, and I don't know exactly what the payoff targets are for this in Brawl since you're limited to these colors, but obviously there is enough of a payoff where just attacking with non-humans and getting humans from your deck for free is good enough. Because I mean, it creates a huge mana advantage. Like I said, in Standard, like you're using this to attack and get fucking 7 drops in play on turn 4. So, and sometimes multiples of them. So I assume that something similar is happening in Brawl. A lot of people want this banned in Standard for that reason, either that or Agent of Treachery, because that is a very potent combo at the moment. I don't really play a lot of Standard, so I can't really tell you, whether that's reasonable or not. But I would imagine that Agent of Treachery is kind of a problem. just because a lot of the blue-green stuff is very powerful, and also playing it and getting it into play very early, and like now Winota is also getting it in play very early. Like Agent of Treachery seems to be a problematic card in Standard, so kind of interesting that they didn't announce anything for Standard here. So, but that's definitely one of the cards I think a lot of people have their eye on, and specifically because of Winota. However, Winota herself, even if you remove Agent of Treachery, could still potentially be a problem, just because I am sure that there are other humans that cheating them into play is perfectly fine and reasonable. So, so let's see. Now this is where some of the more interesting things they say are, and that I really want to talk about this. So, other formats. So, you know, they didn't mention anything for like Modern, Standard, Pioneer here, and this is where they're kind of addressing this. So, first of all, before I say anything about this, I want to say I am very happy that they actually bothered to put in this bit about why they didn't say anything about other formats. That was a very good move, and I'm pleased to see that at least this section exists. I would have much rather have seen them announce bans or, you know, or rule changes or something for other formats, but at the bare minimum, like, they're at least addressing the lack of it here, which that I think is in itself a kind of a victory, because they don't always do that with these announcements. So with a lot of banned and restricted announcements, they only announce like for specific formats now, and then they don't really say anything about everything else. So should be happy that we're getting what we're getting in this regard. So let's take a look at this quick. While this set changes have focused on Legacy, Vintage, and Brawl, we're continuing to watch the evolution of the metagame in each other format, including Standard, Pioneer, and Modern. If changes become needed in other formats, we'll provide this separately in a future announcement. As of now, we're seeing a diverse and dynamic metagame that changes from week to week in each Standard, Pioneer, and Modern. Before determining whether any changes are necessary and what the right changes would be, we need to see the metagame closer to an equilibrium state. Currently, these formats are shifting too quickly for data to indicate what, if any, card or archetype poses a problem. Okay, so there are a couple things I want to say about this, but for right now, I want to point out the quarantine is part of the problem for this. And, okay, so what do I mean by that? So normally, the Wizards of the Coast likes to use a lot of paper magic results, and paper magic does not shift very quickly. Like, things are a lot less liquid in paper. When people buy cards, they cannot just afford to like buy $1,000 deck and then sell it and then buy a different $1,000 deck. Paper magic is just a lot harder to sell out and buy into new decks. So whereas online, you can just trade your deck in for ticks within minutes and then buy a new deck on the spot. It's not like you have to hunt down each individual card and, like, you know, do anything. No, you can literally have, like, you know, you can sell out of your deck and buy a new one within minutes if you want to. And then immediately start playing it. There's no, like, shipping involved. You don't have to drive around to stores or trade with people or anything. Nope. It's easy to do. So the nature of online play is going to be a lot faster because the cards are a lot more liquid. So if you're concerned that the formats are shifting too quickly for that data to be a problem, it's not because necessarily that there isn't a problem there. It's because the formats are getting solved a lot faster, because right now, during the quarantine, online play is all that anybody has to deal with. Like, there isn't really an alternative. You can't go and play F&M at a store. We don't have, like, GPs or SCG Opens or anything like that. People are playing online because that is all they have access to. And when you play online, like, the online metagame is always the one that's going to shift drastically and quickly to accommodate, you know, the power level of the cards and how the metagame is shaking out. So because of the liquidity of everything, it's expected that things are going to move quickly. And Wizards right now, I'm sure that they're used to, you know, being able to take these bans announcements at a much slower rate. You can't do that during a fucking quarantine. Like, you're not playing on paper rules anymore. You have to, like, adapt to this. the quarantine necessitates that things move faster online. I mean, things are going to move faster in Magic as a whole because of that, and you need to be willing to act quicker in order to address it. Like, this whole line about format shifting too quickly, like, it kind of indicates like a fundamental lack of understanding of like how these metagames even evolve in the first place. That's like the first thing that I have a problem with, and I'll get to the other part in a second here. But I want to read this last paragraph before I discuss that. We are well aware. We are aware of some of the players' concerns about the frequency at which they encounter decks using the companions across several formats. It's not a concern, it's a fact, but we'll get to that again. We'll wait and get to that in a second. While we're not currently seeing problematic win rates in Standard, Pioneer, and Modern from decks using companions. Bullshit. We are looking at overall metagame share and potential for repetitive gameplay. If we see signs of long-term health issues resulting from high metagame share of companion decks, we're willing to take steps up to or including changing how the companion mechanic works. For now, metagames need more time to evolve before we can determine whether changes are necessary. So, there are some very big red flags about this. They just admitted that they are willing to consider changing how the companion mechanic works. This line right here is Wizards of the Coast admitting that they fucked up. Companion has fucked up Magic. All right. It was obvious to like most of the people who read these cards in day one. Like a lot of the pros and everybody reading this, like already within minutes of seeing the cards for the first time, knew this is a problem. This is going to cause problems for months to come, and you know what? It has. We're not waiting to see the fucking data for this. We have it, and I'm going to show it to you in a second. So obviously, like the community is well aware that the companion mechanic is a problem, and this is right here, Wizards of the Coast admitting that, yeah, the companion mechanic, as stated, is going to be a problem, and it cannot stay the way it is, because as long as it is, like, your options are then going to have to be over time either ban all of the companions or turn literally every format into commander permanently. So between those two options, like, none of them are great. So the third kind of way to go here is changing how the companion mechanic works, and you only really do that if you admit that the way that you designed it is a complete fuck up. So I'm actually kind of proud that they admitted that they're willing to take steps to consider this, but we should be beyond this point by this point. So it's good that they're saying this, because I think everybody needed to hear this, that they understand that they fucked up, but we shouldn't be waiting to deal with this. There are some pretty easy ways to go about fixing this mechanic, and instead of just letting it drag on for this long, we should actually be doing something about it now, instead of just watching and waiting more. These formats are a burning garbage fire at the moment. So, all right, and I'll temper that a little bit. They're not unplayably bad. Like, you can play, Modern or Standard or Pioneer if you want, but you have to understand, if you're going to play these formats right now, you have to be doing one of two things. And I've said this before, and I will continue to say this. Companion Magic means that you either need to be playing a companion if you're trying to play a deck that wants the game to go long, or you have to be doing something unfair that's going to cause the game to end very quickly. So either like a combo-y kind of deck, or something like a Devoted Druid, an Infact, a Tron, a Burn, or if you're gonna be playing a long game, then you need something like Urion, like Urion Miracles, or Luris Jund. Those are the cards that are going to help you grind out wins into the late game. Those are like the two styles of decks that are going to be the most successful. And so some people enjoy that, like the same way that some people were fine with, Oko being like half of the metagame, where it's like, okay, well, if you want to play, these grindy games of Magic, you pretty much need to have Oko, or you need to have a deck that kind of ignores him and just wins the game regardless. Companions are essentially, the same kind of metagame we had with Oko. We're having that now. And some people like that, and some people didn't really like that. So it's not like this is the worst that these formats have ever been, but I think, in my opinion, it's far from good. Like, I don't like, reducing the decks down to either play Companion or play, like, unfair combo-y kind of decks. Like, that's not really healthy to me. Like, so I don't enjoy that kind of gameplay, and yeah, I don't think that it's good for the future of the game to, like, reduce, deck diversity down to that. But let's go back here, and there's one thing that I really, really want to, like, hammer this home. So where is it? So they did say they're not seeing problematic win rates from this, which I think that's a pro. So when they say problematic win rates, they mean like no deck that is playing a companion is at like 55 or 60% win rates for that. But you could very easily also interpret this at like the way that I think most people would interpret it. Do decks with companions win more than decks without companions? And the answer is absolutely fucking yes. Companion decks have much higher win rate than decks that don't play companions. So any one companion deck, like, at the top of the metagame might not have like that 55% win rate that seems to be the problem for them. But that's because it's playing against other companion decks. It's not that, the companion decks don't have high win rates. It's that they do have higher win rates compared to the decks that don't have them. And that's, I think, the problem that a lot of people have, including myself. And then there's also this element of metagame potential. Yeah, overall metagame share and potential for repetitive gameplay. Well, how many fucking games do we need to play with Luris, looping Mishra's Bauble before we admit that is repetitive gameplay? Because Luris is definitely like one of the most repetitive ones that we see. And same thing with like Urion. We see it's basically used the same way. Just play Urion, blink it a bunch of times with stuff like Teferi, or just get like value out of Arkham's Astrolabe or whatnot. That happens a lot. Like, so there is a lot of repetitive gameplay with that. Same thing with like Devoted Druid. They're just gonna play they have some it can play the Yurda in it and help them with their combos. It's not like these decks are playing out very differently each time. They basically do the same thing with the companions every game. So I don't know why you would say that you're looking at this and you should have. I think that there's pretty good signs that it is kind of repetitive. And the overall metagame share, well, what does this mean? Like, you kind of have to define this a little bit, because this is something that is worth mentioning here. They are talking about diverse and dynamic metagames that changes each week to week. So what does that mean? So their idea of diverse are that if they see like 15 different Luris decks, if there's like Luris Burn and Luris Delver and Luris Jund, they consider that to be diverse. But I think in the eyes of a lot of people, if you see like 15 different Luris decks, that it doesn't really seem that diverse, does it? Because all of the games end up revolving around who's going to grind out with their Luris first, like, or for the longest. It's not really diverse if you're going up against the same card every single match, or like the same small set of cards, like whatever companion cards, because you have access to them every game, which means at some point, if the game drags on long enough, you're inevitably going to play them once you start running out of cards in hand. So there is kind of a divide, like sort of ideologically, on what does diverse gameplay look like with companions, whereas there's the Wizard school of thought is 15 different Luris decks means diverse, and there's like the opposing school of thought, which is the one I lean more towards, 15 different Lurrus decks means there's only really one style of deck, which is Lurrus Soup, and it doesn't really matter what you play around it because you're really just playing Lurrus plus whatever cards support it. I don't think that's... Like, to me, that gets really repetitive and old quickly, and I don't consider that to be diverse, but that's my opinion on it. Obviously, Wizards has a different opinion upon that. But, whereas, there's, yeah, this is what we really need to talk to, though. Where is it? Yeah, okay, so here we go. If we see signs of long-term health issues resulting from high meta share of companion decks. What the fuck are you talking about if you see signs of high metagame share of companion decks? They have been through the goddamn roof since the day they released. Magic players are not stupid. In fact, most Magic players are at least capable of acknowledging when something ridiculously broken comes out, and they can adapt to it very quickly. It only takes, like, you know, a few people to recognize the power of a card, and, like, within 1 week, once they start putting up results on it, like, most of the rest of the players will start gravitating around that strategy once it becomes apparent that it's that good. And, like, the companion cards, like, from day one, when they were spoiled, people looked at them and knew, like, this is one of the most powerful mechanics that's ever existed in this game, because you're effectively starting with an 8th card in your hand, which means if you're going up with an 8-card hand against somebody who only has a 6 or a 7-card hand, you already have like a 60-40 advantage against them just based on the fact that you have an extra card in your starting hand. That is insane. That is ridiculously unbalanced. Every time that you mulligan, you're effectively like losing another 10% to your opponent. So starting with, like, Lurrus is also, like, starting effectively with a 9-card hand. So, yeah, you can kind of see, like, you know, why it's... Anybody who understands, you know, like, how badly, like, mulliganing hurts you. Like, how often do you win games, like, against your opponent when they're on 7 cards and you're on 5? Like, it's not easy to do. Like, unless you're doing something like Tron, which is sort of like a combo-y sort of deck that doesn't need like a full grip of cards. Like, if you're playing like a mid-rangey like mirror match and you're on like 5 cards versus 7 cards, you understand like your chances of winning are greatly diminished because of that. So like a lot of people recognized immediately, like having an 8th or, you know, potentially more cards than that based on stuff like Urion or Lurrus generating that card advantage. Having those extra cards available it changes that dynamic a lot. So it wasn't hard for people to figure out that companions were going to be busted. And so basically from day one, companions have been putting up massive results in these formats. So I want to go and look at this for a second. Let's take a look here. 87% of the decks in the last Modern Challenge played a companion. So this is from like yesterday. 87%. So out of 32 decks, only 4 decks chose not to play a companion in the sideboard. Where is it here? Okay, so this is the Modern Constructive League. So this is the Constructive League from last week, or this is the last one they posted. Out of 58 decks in the league, and remember, the league is special. It is curated by Wizards of the Coast, which means they will try not to. If there are a lot of decks that are very similar in nature with like the cards in them, these are all like the ones that are different from each other. So like if tons of like Lurrus Jund decks like were to put up results, they're not going to show every single one of them. They only show, you know, like 1 or 2 of them based upon like how similar they are. So remember that this is curated, and it means that if like one particular companion deck is doing like better than all the rest of them, it's probably underrepresented here. So, but even still, out of the 58 decks that, you know, were put up in the 5-0 list for this, 41 of them were companion decks. So that's like 71% of them from the curated list were companions. It has been like this since they were fucking released. It has actually been getting worse. Like, they started out, I think, like near like 50% or something like that, And now we're seeing like, you know, where they're going like 70-80%. That almost 90% of the decks in the Modern Challenge playing companions. You're gonna tell me that you don't see that there is a problem from high metagame share of companion decks? What have you been doing? Like, literally, like, this hasn't changed. If like, it's only been getting worse, not better. It's not like the percentage has gone down at all. It just continues to go up. So I don't understand how it is that they can pretend that this is not a problem. And that's for Modern. I mean, I don't know, maybe Pioneer's going to be different. So let's look at Pioneer here. So this was you know, the K10, or was it KT Kenshinks, like, does a fantastic data on all the different formats. So this one is for Pioneer. Or no, I'm sorry, no, this one is no, this one is still Modern. Damn it. There is one for Pioneer. I was just looking at it, but I don't have this pulled up right now. But no, okay, so now this one is the week 3 for Modern, right? So let's look at this. Like, all of the companions. So this was a little bit farther back, right? Yeah. Yeah, so this was the 3rd week. So we can kind of get an idea of whether it's been getting better or worse. So like so yeah, from 418 to 509. So, you know, a couple weeks ago, what the companion meta was like about 66% of, like, you know, the most successful decks. Of the full metagame, it's like 64%. And now we see it's like, you know, 70-80%. It's just getting worse over time. I don't have Pioneer pulled up here, unfortunately, but I can assure you that Pioneer is not any different. It's in the same boat. Like, it might not be quite as high as Modern is right now, but the companions are still dominating in Pioneer. There are plenty of decks like the Orzhov Aura's deck that Luris is in. Jeskai Prowess with Luris. There's even like a red-green Obosh deck that's going, like, there's tons of them. Like, oh yeah, the Yorion control decks, like, because it turns out, you know, they still have stuff like Omen of the Sea and Teferi in that deck, which makes Yorion very strong. So, yeah, like, that is absolutely ridiculous that you'd even pretend that the companion decks are not, like, already a ridiculously high metagame share. So, that, I find that like, the most insulting thing about this whole article is that they're pretending that they have not yet seen signs that the companions are already dominating these things. So, alright, so we know that it's a problem. We have data that shows that it's a problem that is getting worse over time. So, why would Wizards let these formats continue to go instead of taking immediate action? Well, I have a theory, and it's one that, like, some other people have promoted, and it's Wizards of the Coast wants to sell Ikoria packs. That's really kind of what it comes down to. If they banned all the companions from these formats or made whatever rule change it is that's going to nerf them, people would be less inclined to buy Ikoria packs because, I mean, they right now they can't. It's hard for people to go and buy paper Magic cards, and it's hard for them to want to buy them because all the gaming stores are closed right now. Well, or at least a lot of them are, and there's no, like, paper Magic events to go around because of different lockdowns because of coronavirus. So it seemed like it's kind of a cynical take, but I mean, it's the only one that really makes any sense. I mean, the data obviously shows that it's a problem, and instead of actually addressing it in, you know, the most popular formats for them right now, they're just taking it not even like slow, but like purposefully slow to address the problem. Because I think that, in my opinion, I think they just want to go and sell more packs of Ikoria to get people to buy the companion cards, and then in a few months when the next set comes out, or, you know, maybe when Zendikar Rising comes out, that'll be when they finally make a change like this. So I'm sorry if you are really, you know, enamored with Standard, Modern, or Pioneer, but I'm telling you now that it seems that they're gonna let this fester on for a while. The same way they did with Hogak. They already, like, showed us that they don't want to ban cards from, you know, the new sets right away if they can avoid it. Hogak went on from what, the beginning of June to like the end of August. So several months before they actually did anything. You know, they banned for Bridge from Below as like a token effort to try to stop it, but that did nothing. And they waited till the end of August before they finally banned Hogak. And I mean, it makes sense because that's around the time when, you know, their next set was going to come out, like within like a month. They already had like Modern Horizons on the shelf at that point. For how long? For several months. So once they finally were selling out of that, then, you know, when the next products come out, then you ban it. And I have a feeling that's kind of what we're going to see with the companions. We're not going to see them take action on it until we're closer to the point where the next product is in line to be bought, and then people are not needing to buy Ikoria packs anymore. Then they'll deal with companion, and I can almost guarantee it has to be via a rule change. They've already acknowledged that a rule change is something that they're looking at doing. I don't see them banning all of the companions from everything. I think the more likely thing that they're going to do is they're going to change the rule in some way, where the ideal way, I think, would be treat them all like they're conspiracies, and that you just cannot play companions, you know, as like, you can't use the companion mechanic in Constructed the same way that you can't use conspiracy mechanics in Constructed. Or, you know, they could just say that what was he? Oh, maybe instead of starting from your sideboard, like if you want to use the companion, it takes up a slot in your initial 7-card hand instead of being an 8th card. I mean, I guess that would be more like, it'd be better than it is now, but it would still be like, I still think even in that scenario, Luris would still probably be an issue. So I don't know if that's gonna be. Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna solve the problem or not, but that seems like the road that we're probably on here. So yeah, but this pretending that, you know, we already don't have the proof in the pudding that companion is like ridiculously dominating these formats, that is fucking ridiculous. Like, everybody knows it. Like, I don't need to, you know, make that claim, you know, unfounded. We have tons and tons and tons of data since the day that these companions were released on MTGO that shows that they have been dominating, and not only have been, but continue to even like further increase in meta shares as time's going on. So it is kind of beyond the pale that they're just going there. They are ignoring the health of these formats and just letting these formats fester in order for whatever reason they have, whether it be their own Ikoria paper pack sales or what. I don't know. Maybe there's some other reason, but I mean, it's kind of hard to envision any other reason why they would be okay with just letting formats like that suffer. So overall, I would say this announcement is not the worst announcement that we could have got. They did, like, you know, fix. I don't want to say fix. They did something relevant to both Vintage and Legacy. I guess Brawl is fine if they, you know, they did something of value to that format. But probably the biggest thing they did is they at least, like, kind of acknowledged that companion is a mistake. Like, the fact that they're considering to change how the mechanic works is more or less an admission that they understand it's bad. So that's way more than we normally get from Wizards of the Coast on these issues. However, I would go to say that this was way not enough. They needed to do way more than this. I think Legacy is going to have a bunch of problems because of all the cards I named that they didn't ban. So, like, Yurion 4-color Snow Soup is going to be a huge problem. And, yeah, like, Modern, Pioneer, and Standard are just left to burn until whenever they feel like it's appropriate. And I hope that I'm wrong, and I hope that tomorrow they're going to announce, or, like, next week they'll announce, like, yeah, they were going to have some announcement for that in, like, you know, a week from now. But I get the feeling it's probably going to be months before we see something done about this, as opposed to maybe a week or two, which is sad, but that's probably, like, signs seem to be pointing in that direction. So as for me, I am probably not going to be playing as much Modern and Pioneer as I used to. If companions are bugging you out, I would say maybe look to Pauper. Pauper does not have companions. I'm certainly going to be looking at that. I think that there's some interesting decks we can play in there. And I'm sure at some point in the near future we're going to start seeing some Pauper content in this channel, because I think that it is way more entertaining to play Pauper than to try to deal with companion nonsense. So I know some people enjoy it, but I certainly don't, and I know there's a lot of people that don't. So don't feel like there's no Magic to be played at all. There certainly are things that you can play. I mean, Legacy will improve at least a little bit from Luris being banned, and Zerdat being banned, but and it's probably likely that once Yorion asserts its dominance, then something will happen with that too, but can only hope that it's sooner rather than later. Until then, I don't really have anything else to say about this, so hope you enjoyed this Magic Rock Talk. I have a feeling we're going to be doing this again once they finally get to figuring out how they're going to deal with this companion nonsense, but I would like to do more of these, and I'm curious to know what your opinions are. Like, just tell me, like, do you like companion? Do you think that the modern is like in a great place for you right now? Like, how do you feel about diversity? Like, do you consider like 15 Luris decks to be diverse if they're all like different archetypes, or do you just like not like playing against 15 Luris decks regardless of what cards they're playing in them? So I don't know if there's any standard experts out there. I'm interested to know, like, how do you assess standard state with companions right now? Because I know that there's a lot of issues with stuff like Fires of Invention and, like I said, the Agent of Treachery, but I think that companion is also been sort of an issue. I think Karuga with Fires is sort of its own problem, but I don't know. I don't play a whole lot of Standard, so I couldn't tell you. So if you play a lot of Standard, I'm interested to know, like, what do you think about it? Do you think that the format like needs changes, and if so, what changes would you make? So any questions or comments, or you just want to like yell memes in the comments, that I'm totally fine with that. But yeah, give me your feedback. I'm curious. Do you want to see more Rock Talks? Because I want to do stuff that you guys are going to find interesting, and I think that talking about things like this, I find it to be interesting, and it seemed like last time people liked it, so I'm hoping that we're going to continue to do more of these and it'll be successful in the future. But let me know. I want to know what your feelings are. That's all I've got for now, so thanks everybody, and I will see you again later this week, and we'll have some gameplay. I don't know exactly what we're going to do yet, probably Historic, and then I want to get some Pauper on the schedule, but I'm not sure exactly what we're going to start with, but my guess would be probably some form of Blue Deck and Pauper, so we might vary it too. Like, I may not choose to do Pauper the same way I do everything else in here. I might bounce around with a few different decks and to try to get a better idea, because I don't really play a whole lot of Pauper, but it's a format that I'm interested in doing content for. So if you have thoughts on that too, like if you have stuff that you think that would be interesting to play, maybe like the Blue-Red Fairies deck or like Slivers or something like that, please, I would love to know. So I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy.
Yeah, that was good Rock Talk.